Well, this happened when we were in Brisbane. We were walking around. I was walking around with my friend, and we met a guy. He was a older guy, and he invited us to go and have some coffee with him because he was going to have coffee with his friends. So we went along. There was a setup in the park. Orange Sky. They do laundry and hot showers for people who need them. So we walked there, we were talking to some of the people who were there, the people who were volunteering. Then the MP for Western, state MP for Western was there also. She represents the Greens Party. So something which had come up a couple of times, I discussed with her about the voice to Parliament for the indigenous people. And this is a sensitive issue for so many people. The place where I stay is mostly conservative in the sense that they hold on to the old values. There is a lot of sentiments for people from people who are against the voice to Parliament. In the discussion with her, I asked her position. Well, she said something like it wasn't enough. For me, it is a step, just like the apology was a step. The issue of reparations has come up time and again, mostly in relation to African Americans or, Black Americans in America. In Australia, reparations have not been really that prominent or at the forefront of conversation. Where I come from, in Kenya, after colonization, there was something called the scheme. The area is still called the scheme where I come from. So what happened was the government put a scheme in place where people will get 40 or 38 acres and a mule, as the story goes. 40 acres and a mule. Let's go with that. So both of my grandparents on my mother and father's side got land in the same area. That's how I got here, In that sense, I feel that it will be an opportunity for people to move on from the white guilt or whatever they're holding on to. In Australia, the people who call themselves liberals, the party, they have a coalition with the Nationals, which means they're more conservative. The Labour Party is known to be more progressive, so to say. So they're more liberal in terms of their policy. The politics is about policy. I am not a political expert, so I will not go into the details of the politics in Australia. But the bill has passed in Parliament to allow a referendum for the indigenous voice to Parliament, which means the indigenous people will advise the government or Parliament on policies which affect them. And it's a step. For me, it's a step. But we have to look at it. So let's look at it. I've gone into Google AI, which is called Bard AI, and I have looked at the population of indigenous people in Australia, and is about 2% or 970,000 people. 2% of the population is not much of a voice. So we have to look at it. If reparations have to happen, it means if we give 1 million for each person, or let's say each family, it will be too much. It will be billions, hundreds of billions, which is a lot more than the Australian budget. But let's say we find some way of repatriating the indigenous people where they can move on. But more importantly, whether you're for or against, we can also move on as a population. When you look at the guilt, or what people call white guilt, it's the driving force of all these kinds of policies, or let's say movements, whether it was the sorry or now with the referendum on the voice to parliament. It is a guilt which is driving it, because they don't really have a voice to push something into parliament. It is because people feel guilty. Now, nobody can make you feel guilty. It's something which is already there. Guilt is something you hold on to because you feel like something is wrong, something is right, and you want to be a good person. So you feel guilty because you want to impress. So political correctness is a lot of that, people feeling guilty. So they want to settle that by feeling like they're correcting the wrongs which have been done. It's not really about what the indigenous people want. It's about people wanting to wash away the guilt. So, how to move on, even when it comes to issue with racism? When will we get to a point where we don't look at race when we looking at issues in society? The Morgan Freeman way is to not talk about it. But whether you talk about it or not, people are holding on to it. There is guilt. There is also a sense of owing, being owed something, whether it's an apology or reparations or whatever it is. There is that holding on to something which is gone. If you look at the way the world is now, it is so mixed. There is mixing of cultures and communities everywhere. So where is the sense in holding on to the idea of difference in the skin color determining our nature? If you go deeper into your nature, you will see there is something which is beyond the surface level, the superficial level of identity. When will we get to a point where we can move on? And this is the issue of guilt, whether it's white guilt or whatever guilt. We have to get to a point where we address within ourselves. When this is not possible, it will play out in so many ways where people can be guilted into doing things because they want to be good, but they don't want to take responsibility for that judgment of good versus bad. Society is stuck a lot in this with the political correctness and so many other movements, which I will not get into, but essentially, guilt is a driving force for so many mechanisms, structures in society.